I never thought a simple joke during a family dinner would end with a slap in front of 30 people. There I was, in my navy blue dress that Lyra had praised so much when she arrived. "Elegant as always, Mom," she'd said, a glass of white wine in her hand. The house was full of laughter, clinking glasses, and plates being passed from hand to hand. It was her 63rd birthday, and she had organized everything with that efficiency that always characterized her. Nothing was out of place until I spoke. "Do you remember when you wanted to be an astronaut, Lyra, and cried because the costume's helmet was too heavy?" I said it with a laugh, tenderly. Just a mother's anecdote, nothing more. Some guests smiled, but Lyra did not. I saw her face harden, her jaw tightening like a violin's string. She stood up abruptly and, without a word, slapped me. A sharp slap, without hesitation or regret. The room fell silent. The only sound was the clinking of a glass falling to the floor. No one stood up, no one said a thing. I brought my hand to my cheek, more out of surprise than pain. I felt my skin burn, but what burned more was my soul. Lyra's boss broke the silence with a nervous chuckle. "Wow, that was unexpected. Always so explosive, Lyra." There were a few uncomfortable laughs. Everyone went back to eating. I didn't. I stared at her. She turned and returned to her chair as if nothing had happened. I remember smoothing the tablecloth with my palm, an automatic gesture of mine, as if I wanted to calm something inside me. And that night, believe me, there was a lot to calm. I stayed until the end. I endured everything, even the forced speeches and the three-tiered cake that she herself didn't touch, just so I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me leave early. When I got home, I sat in the dimly lit living room. I took out my chamomile tea cup, the same one I used every night, with its chipped rim, and held it in my hands like someone clutching the last thing they have left. I looked at myself in the sideboard mirror. At 76 years old, that was the first time anyone had ever raised a hand to me. And it was my daughter. I asked myself many things that night, but one above all, when did Lyra stop seeing me as her mother and start seeing me as a burden? I didn't sleep. I just waited for the dawn with a lost gaze. And there, in that silence, I made a decision. This would be the last time I allowed such a humiliation. The last. Because that slap wasn't just a public humiliation, it was a message. You don't matter anymore. And if that's what she believed, I was going to show her just how wrong she was. I wouldn't make a scene, I wouldn't cry in front of anyone, but I began to silently prepare my response. Lyra thought she had me under her thumb, convinced that I had nothing, that my only wealth was my worn-out memory. What she doesn't know is that I have something more, something she can never touch. And for the first time in many years, I smiled. A quiet but firm smile. The smile of someone who has decided not to be stepped on anymore. If someone had told me that Lyra would end up treating me like this, I would have sworn they were wrong, because I raised her with my soul, you know? Not just with my arms, but with every fiber of my being. I remember when she was 8 years old. Her birthday party was fairy-themed. I made the costume myself with tulle I bought at the fabric store with the last bill in my wallet. I spent 3 nights sewing it by hand, embroidering little stars on the back with silver thread, and I even made her wings out of a wire hanger and white stockings. She would jump around the garden with a wand made from a wooden spoon, saying she was going to make the world a brilliant place. Every year was different. Princesses, astronauts, scientists, mermaids. Once she asked me for a cake in the shape of a book, because, Mom, books are magic, just like you. How could I say no? I was a literature teacher at the neighborhood high school in Oak Haven. I didn't earn much, but I stretched every penny. And if I had to sell something for her to have what she wanted, I did it without a second thought. My colleagues would tell me, "Serafina, don't overdo it, kids don't notice." But Lyra did notice, or so I thought. Every card she gave me said, "Thanks for everything, Mom, you're the best." I kept them all. They are in a wooden box that Beatrix gave me years ago, with hand-painted flowers on the lid. Every time I open it, I get that smell of dried lavender and old ink. Sometimes I open it just to remember that yes, she once loved me. The parties were in the garden, with crepe paper garlands and recycled Christmas lights. We invited all her friends, and I organized games, raffles, even themed piñatas. At the end of the day, I would always be exhausted, but happy. Lyra would hug me tightly and whisper in my ear, "When I grow up, I'm going to take care of you like you take care of me." Can you imagine? I never had luxuries. My coat had more patches than new fabric, but she always had new shoes at the start of the school year. She never noticed that I ate less so she could have more, or that I spent entire nights grading papers to get extra hours to pay for the violin lessons she wanted so much. And now she laughs with her friends about how I was dramatic, how I liked to play the martyr. Do they really think it was for show? No, my love, it was for love. For that love that burns and transforms, the one that asks for nothing in return. But maybe that was my mistake. I never asked for anything, not even recognition. Just a sincere smile, and I haven't seen one in years. When she moved into her apartment downtown, decorated with marble and designer plants, I offered to help her move. She told me she had already hired a company and didn't invite me to see how it turned out. "I'll show you pictures later, Mom. It's a mess right now." I'm still waiting for those photos. But I do have photos, printed ones, not digital, from when she had cake on her cheeks and her hair was held back with colorful barrettes. I look at them from time to time in the solitude of my house and wonder at what point I stopped being her mother and became a nuisance. I don't know. I only know that the little girl with the fairy wings is gone. The house has been too quiet lately. It's funny, isn't it, how silence can be heavier than noise. And this house, the same one where I raised Lyra, used to be brimming with life. Now, all you can hear are the creaks of old wood and the ticking of the pendulum clock that belonged to my grandmother. I wake up early out of habit, put the kettle on, take out my chamomile teacup, the same one every night, and check the mail, even though I know no one writes letters anymore. The only calls I get are from the bank or some consultant who wants to help with my investments, as if they knew anything about my life. Lyra doesn't call. Or if she does, it's to ask for something. "Mom, I need you to sign this insurance document," or "Can you look in the blue drawer for my birth certificate?" She never asks how I am. She never has time. The last time she came to see me was because she needed a copy of the will. "Just in case, Mom, you know how things are these days." She asked with that corporate smile of hers, the one that doesn't reach her eyes. I offered her tea. She just stood by the door, not even sitting down. And every time she enters the house, she does so as if she were a visitor, looking at everything with critical eyes. "Mom, you should modernize this kitchen. Do you still have such old-fashioned curtains?" I just nod. Why argue? Once I tried to ask her if she had time for lunch with me. I had the idea of making her favorite meatballs. I cooked all morning. In the end, she sent me a text. Something came up at the office. "Another day, okay?" I froze the meatballs. They're still there. There are 4 chairs at the dining table, but only one is used. Sometimes I set an extra plate, as if I'm expecting someone. I realize how sad that sounds, but it's hard for me to accept that no one is coming. Beatrix calls me sometimes. "How are you, Serafina?" she asks. Only she still calls me by my name. She has that firm voice, as if she could support me from a distance. She listens to me, asks about my plants, my books. She sends me pictures of her garden, and I reply with images of my rose bushes, as if we're maintaining a thread of life between us. Sometimes I walk around the neighborhood. I greet Mrs. Adler, the new neighbor. She always smiles at me. The other afternoon I saw her with her phone, as if she were recording something. I didn't think much of it. "Your garden is lovely, Mrs. Serafina," she said. It was the first time in weeks someone had used my name with affection. But when I returned home, that knot in my stomach came back, because even though the garden is beautiful, the inside feels emptier and emptier, as if this house were silently saying goodbye to me. There's a blanket on the couch that Lyra used when she was a child. It still smells like lavender. Sometimes I put it over my legs and close my eyes. I imagine I'm reading a story out loud and she's listening, snuggled up beside me. But then I open my eyes and no one is there. Now I see it clearly. The signs were there for a long time. It wasn't an isolated slap. It was the culmination of years of contempt disguised as concern. Lyra has always had that condescending tone. "Mom, don't exaggerate, Mom. Nobody uses that anymore, as if everything I say or do is a bad joke. And I, at first, thought it was part of her independence, her modern way of living. It's the new generation, Serafina, Beatrix would tell me, trying to console me. But no, it wasn't just that. A few years ago, Lyra convinced me to give her control of my accounts. It's for your safety, Mom. There are so many scammers these days, I can help you manage everything. She said it as if it were a favor, but since then, every time I need some of my own money, I have to ask her for it. And sometimes, not even that. That's not a prudent expense, Mom. She told me the last time I asked to transfer funds to fix the roof. As if I were a child who doesn't know how to manage her own pennies. And who took care of her when life left her trembling? Who paid for her private university when the scholarship wasn't enough? I sold her father's watch and 2 sapphire rings that belonged to my mother. With that, I paid for her first semester. She knows, of course, she acknowledges it. I'll never forget when I asked if she wanted to come with me to the doctor, just for company. Nothing serious. She told me she had a meeting with an important client. Tell me how it went later, she said without looking up from her phone. She never asked again. And then there are the times she embarrasses me in public. Recently, at a dinner with her colleagues, she introduced me like this. This is my mother. She used to be a teacher, but she's retired now, though she still thinks everything in life can be solved with Shakespeare. And she let out a little laugh. No one else laughed, but the damage was done. The worst part wasn't the comment, it was her look, that mix of shame and superiority, as if she were tolerating me only because it looked good to show she had a mother. And you know what's saddest? That even then I kept making excuses for her. She's stressed, Serafina. She's under a lot of pressure at work. But now I see it's not stress, it's disdain, and she's been cultivating it for years, little by little, like boiling a frog so slowly it doesn't notice. She even distanced me from the bank, changed the password to the email we used for legal matters, saying it was for protection. And I, trusting, gave in. For your own good, Mom. Always with that phrase, always with that poisoned smile. I don't even have access to the original will we drafted with Alistair years ago. She has the only copy, and when I asked for a printed version, she said there was no need to worry about that now. And I swallow my pride, I keep quiet, because I still love her, because it's still hard for me to believe that Lyra, my Lyra, is capable of seeing me as a burden. But every word, every decision, every omission has been another stone in this wall she has built between us. And that wall, believe me, can no longer be ignored. Sometimes I wonder if Lyra remembers that day I came home with empty hands and a heavy heart. It was the last time I opened the blue velvet box where I kept the few remaining family jewels. It wasn't a great fortune, but each piece had a history. The pearl necklace, my mother's wedding gift. The opal earrings my husband gave me when Lyra was born. The onyx ring, my grandmother's heirloom. Pieces that were valuable not just for the gold or the stones, but for everything they meant, memory, lineage, affection. But that day, Lyra was crying at the kitchen table, the postgraduate forms scattered in front of her. I got in, Mom, but I have no way to pay for the first semester. Her voice trembled, and it felt like a dagger to me. How could I not support her? So I walked to the bedroom, opened the box, and put every piece of jewelry into a velvet pouch. That same afternoon, I took them to a jeweler downtown. They gave me less than they were worth, of course, but it was enough. I came home with an envelope of wrinkled bills and left them next to her cup of tea. Don't ask, Lyra, I told her, just make the most of it. She hugged me, yes, but it was a short, almost mechanical hug, and the subject was never mentioned again. Years passed. She graduated with honors, got her first well-paying job at an agency, and it became increasingly difficult to find an afternoon to see her. I'm busy, Mom. We'll talk later. Always later. She never mentioned that her mother paid for her postgraduate studies, not even when she gave that speech at her company for her promotion. She thanked her mentors, her colleagues, even the barista at the corner coffee shop. For me, not a word. Beatrix noticed. She looked at me from her seat and pressed her lips together, but said nothing. She also knows when silence hurts more than screams. The funny thing is that Lyra does remember my mistakes. The time I forgot to take her on a school trip, the time I couldn't buy her the fashionable shoes in 6th grade. She tells those stories, exaggerates them, repeats them as if they were part of her official biography. But the real sacrifices, the ones that broke me inside, of those there is no record. A few days ago, while cleaning the living room shelf, I found her graduation photo. She's in a cap and gown, a triumphant smile, and I'm next to her in the old coat I wore because I couldn't afford another one. In the photo, I'm smiling, but I know that smile was borrowed because inside I knew my place in her life was becoming increasingly blurry. And what other choice did I have? A mother doesn't ask the value of her sacrifice, but a mother also has the right to ask, and my place? Where did I end up in your story? It was Mrs. Adler who showed me. That morning, while I was watering my roses, she approached with her quick walk and a strange expression. "Mrs. Serafina, I think you need to see this." I thought it was another new recipe or a cat video, like the ones we used to share for a laugh, but no. She handed me her phone with trembling hands, and there I was, in a video, in the living room of Lyra's house, with the warm light of the chandelier hanging just above. My face turning from the slap, the petrified guests, the clear sound of that hand striking my face. The caption read, "When your mom tries to ruin your birthday and you end up teaching her a lesson." Posted by Lyra. I felt my chest empty, as if all the air in the garden had escaped at once. How could she, my daughter, have posted it? I read the comments. People laughing, using emojis. Some said I was a drama queen, that it was obvious the old lady wanted attention. Others, crueler, suggested I deserved the slap. One even wrote, "That's how you do it, set boundaries with boomers." My name wasn't there, of course, just my mother, but my voice was unmistakable. My dress, my anecdote, everything there, exposed like a caricature of what was a real humiliation. I sat on the garden bench. I didn't even cry. It was a sadness so deep it couldn't fit into tears. How do you explain what it feels like to be turned into a public joke, when your own blood offers you up for ridicule as if it were entertainment? Mrs. Adler touched my shoulder. "If you want, I can get it taken down. I have contacts, there are ways to report it." I shook my head. "Leave it. Let it be seen, let it stay there." Because, for the first time, I no longer wanted to protect her. I was no longer going to excuse her behavior. She had crossed a line from which there is no return. I went inside the house. I went straight to the desk. I took out a brown leather folder that I rarely touched. In it were the documents I still kept, the old will, the letters that Alistair, my lawyer, sent me every December, and, most importantly, the handwritten note that Gwendolyn left me before she died. That woman, the director of the library where I worked for the last 20 years, left me a discreet fortune with one condition: do with it what you believe is just. And what was just, in that moment, was to stop being silent. I looked at the video again. I played it one more time, this time without looking away. Yes, there I was, old, alone, ridiculed. But there too was her cruelty, her arrogance, her contempt. Not even the best filter could erase that. So I decided. I'm not going to fight, I'm not going to scream, but every penny I have will be protected. Not out of resentment, but for dignity. Because if Lyra thinks she can hit me and then profit from my image, she's going to find out that I am neither her stepping stone nor her puppet. That video will be her trophy. She can have it. Because I have already chosen my path, and it does not include her. There were no shouts, no drama. Just a quiet morning, the song of blackbirds at the window, and my blue-wheeled suitcase ready by the door. I didn't leave a letter, not a note. What for? Lyra didn't need explanations. She had already said everything with her silence, her contempt, and that slap that everyone could now see on the internet. I packed only what was necessary: my most beloved books, the blanket my mother knitted, the one with the frayed edges, a locket I've kept since I was 16, and a box of letters and photos. No furniture, no ornaments. She can have the rest. After all, she already acted as if the house were hers. She arrived shortly before noon. She found me at the entrance, with my coat on and keys in my hand. She stopped, confused. "Where are you going?" I looked her straight in the eye, without a hint of a tremor. To a place where I won't be humiliated. Her mouth opened, but she said nothing. I held out the keys. I'm leaving you the house for now. She took them slowly, as if she didn't understand. But of course she understood. She always understands. She just doesn't like it when she's not in control. And what am I supposed to do with all this? She asked, looking at the boxes she still hadn't unpacked from her move. I shrugged. Do whatever you want. You always do. I took a step outside. The air was warm, full of pollen. For the first time in years, I felt my lungs fill without effort. You can't just leave like this, Mom, she said, now with a hint of alarm. I paused for a moment. I can, Lyra. You recorded me without permission, you mocked me in front of strangers, you took away my voice and my dignity. And you still expect me to stay here, waiting for your apology. It was just a joke, she said, almost desperately. Well, your joke set me free, I replied. And I left. I didn't look back, not when she slammed the door, not when I heard her curse. I kept walking, the suitcase rolling behind me, like someone crossing a bridge that is silently burning. I took the bus to Beatrix's house. She received me without questions, with a cup of hot tea and a blanket for my lap. I sat on her sofa, that old sofa that smells of cinnamon and books, and for the first time in a long time, I rested. Do you want to talk? She asked. Not now, I replied. Then just sit. You're safe here. I snuggled up with my blanket and closed my eyes. I let the world keep spinning without me for a while, because it was no longer my responsibility to hold it up. Lyra got the house, but I got something more valuable, my peace. The nights at Beatrix's house have a different rhythm. The clock doesn't rule, the television is on low, just for company, and the floor lamp casts a warm light on the armchair. I sit there, with my blanket on my legs, the locket between my fingers, and let the thoughts come one by one. Lyra, my Lyra, did she ever truly love me, or did she just tolerate me like one tolerates an old lamp that's in the way, but isn't thrown out due to habit? Since she was a child, she was strong, intelligent, impatient. I admired her. I always believed that strength came from me, but now I'm starting to doubt it. Maybe I just molded her to survive in a harsh world and, in the process, taught her that tenderness was a weakness. I think of all those times she spoke to me as if I were a burden. Was it always like that and I just didn't want to see it? Or did it change little by little, and I kept justifying it, excusing it, forgiving it, until there was nothing left? Beatrix says I shouldn't torture myself. Some daughters only love when it's convenient, she told me last night while she was knitting, and some mothers confuse need with love. I didn't know what to answer, because it's true. Lyra needed me for a long time, for her studies, to look after her children when she had them, to help her with the move, with the bills, with the paperwork. She always needed something, and I always said yes. Is that love, or just functionality? I'll never forget the last time she truly hugged me. It was when she found out she had been accepted into her dream university. She hugged me and cried. I did it, Mom. We did it. We said it together. We did it. That was the last time I felt like we were a team. Then came the excuses, the distance, the full schedules, the I'll call you later. And I, foolishly, kept setting the table in case she came. Now I understand. It wasn't disinterest, it was strategy. I'm not a saint, either. Sometimes I was harsh. Sometimes I demanded too much. Sometimes I even stayed silent when I should have said something. But I never stopped loving her, never stopped believing that deep down, there was affection. Today, I'm not so sure. What if she never loved me? What if I was just her platform, a soft base where she could land when the world hit her, but never a priority, never a real refuge? The locket in my hands has a photo of her as a child, 7 years old, pigtails, a toothless smile, eyes looking at me with devotion. What happened to that little girl? Maybe she left, or maybe she was never there. And it hurts me to think that. It pierces me like a cold whisper, but it also frees me. Because if the love wasn't there, it's not my fault that there's nothing left. I didn't break the thread. I just let go of the rope that was choking me. The lamp flickers a little. Beatrix is asleep in her armchair with the knitting needles still between her fingers. I approach her, cover her feet with her blanket, and whisper, "Thank you," because even though Lyra left me empty, here I am. And I still have someone who calls me by my name. It didn't happen overnight. That's the lie you tell yourself to avoid seeing the damage. But now, from a distance, I see it clearly. Lyra didn't love me, she used me. Every gift, every hug, every "thanks, Mom," was followed like a shadow by a demand, a favor, a loan, a sacrifice. When she was a child, she would leave me little notes on the fridge, "You're the best." Then she would ask me to help with the costume, with the science project, with the impossible assignment. And I, happy, believed it was love. I didn't see that it was a trade, a transaction disguised as affection. In university, every call started with an "I miss you, Mom," and ended with a "Could you send me another $100? She never said what for, only that it was urgent. I would close my book, run to the bank, and tell myself that's what mothers do. Over time, I learned to anticipate the move. If she called me for no reason, I knew something was coming. If she sent me flowers, it was because she needed a big favor. If she invited me to dinner, it was because something was approaching that required my signature or my sacrifice. And still, I accepted it? Why? Because I was hungry, not for food, but for affection. The affection I didn't give myself, the one I hoped she would return as a reward for my devotion. Clarity is cruel, but it is also necessary. A few days ago, I found a shopping list in my purse that I had written last December. It included ingredients for a carrot cake, her favorite, a vanilla-scented candle, and a pair of leather gloves I saw in a shop window. I was planning to give them to her for Christmas. I never bought them. I couldn't afford it, because that month Lyra asked me for help with the mortgage again. She said it was just for a couple of weeks. "I'll pay you back later, Mom." She never did. And the cake was never baked. Beatrix says my issue wasn't blindness, it was misplaced loyalty. That you don't choose to be a mother like you choose a plant, you do it with hope, and when that hope withers, it's as if something inside you dries up too. But there is a type of clarity that comes after the desert, when there is nothing left to give and the only thing left is yourself. I am there, in that place. Lyra turned my every gesture into emotional capital, a debt. She made me feel like I was always at fault, that I was never enough. But now I know, it was she who needed to feel power, control, to have everything revolve around her. And I, finally, have stepped out of that orbit. I'm not afraid of being alone. What I was afraid of was seeing with clarity. And now that I have it, I'm not looking away. I pour myself a cup of tea, stroke the lid of my box of memories, and say something in a low voice, just for me, never again. Beatrix didn't need explanations when I arrived at her house with my suitcase and a shattered heart. She just said, "I was waiting for you." And she hugged me as only a true friend knows how, without judgment, without conditions, without a clock. She made me carrot and ginger soup, like when we were young and studied for our literature exams together. She put a blanket on the sofa and let me choose which old movie we would watch. I opted for Gone with the Wind. I fell asleep halfway through. The next morning, when I opened my eyes, Beatrix already had breakfast served, rye bread, white cheese, and orange marmalade. "Today, we don't talk about Lyra," she said without looking at me. "Today, we talk about you." We ate in silence. Then we went out into the garden. Beatrix watered her lavenders, and I sat by the rose bush, the one that always blooms more for her than for me. "Does it hurt a lot?" she asked after a while. I nodded. "Do you feel like it's your fault?" I nodded again. "Well, stop it. Because it's not. It never was." I broke down right there, among the rose bushes and the damp earth. Not with screams or sobs, but with that silent weeping that comes out when the soul gets tired of holding so much in. Beatrix held my arm and offered me a handkerchief. "Serafina, you are not the one who needs to apologize. You are not the one who needs to justify yourself. You have been used, and that is violence. Not physical, but just as cruel." I looked at her with red eyes, speechless, and she continued, "I saw that video. And I saw it not because I wanted to, but because Mrs. Adler sent it to me, angrily. Lyra didn't just hit you, she mocked you and shared it as if you were a comedy character. There is no forgiveness for that." I wanted to say something, perhaps defend her. But Beatrix raised her hand. No, no more excuses. No more, but she's my daughter. Not anymore. That doesn't make her untouchable. If someone else had done to you what she did, you would have already cut all ties. Why do you allow it from her? I didn't know what to answer. That night, Beatrix took out her folder of documents, showed me her will, and explained how she had organized everything so that no one could take advantage of her if she were gone. You should do it too, Serafina. Not for revenge, for protection. So that what you still have doesn't fall into the wrong hands. I looked at her with a lump in my throat. And what if I regret it? Then you change it. But at least you will have made a decision for yourself, not out of fear of her. At bedtime, she left a cup of chamomile tea on my nightstand and turned on a small lamp. She tucked me in up to my shoulders and said something I will never forget. You don't have to prove anything here. You are enough, Serafina. You always were. I stared at the ceiling in the dim light, with the warmth of the blanket and the scent of lavender in the air. For the first time in a long time, I felt that someone truly saw me. A week after settling in at Beatrix's house, I sat across from Alistair with a folder in my hands and a decision made. The same Alistair who had been the family lawyer for 30 years, who attended my husband's funeral and then my sister's without charging an hour. He looked at me with that mix of respect and concern I had always known in him. Are you sure, Serafina? More than ever, I replied. I want to change my will. It wasn't an impulsive decision. I had meditated on it night after night, with a hot cup of chamomile tea in my hands and the old blanket on my legs. I had made lists, compared foundations, reviewed names, and above all, I had thought about Lyra and what she did not deserve. Everything will go to the Women Readers Foundation, I told him. I want scholarships for young women who love books, so they don't have to depend on anyone to survive, so they don't end up like me. Alistair nodded without judgment, only asking, and about Lyra? Exclude her completely. He was silent for a moment, then picked up his pen and began to write. I explained that it wasn't about punishment, but about protection. That Lyra, if she were left as the heir, would only use that money to keep climbing in her world of appearances. I was not going to feed that machine anymore, not with what I had built with so much effort. I want to armor plate everything, I told him. I want it so that no matter how hard she tries, she can't contest it. Alistair showed me how to create specific clauses, how to designate the foundation as the irrevocable beneficiary, and how to ensure that any attempt by Lyra to question the will would be legally futile. When we finished, I felt light, as if I had closed a door and the past could no longer reach me on the other side. Alistair looked at me tenderly. Few people do this with such clarity, Serafina. Are you at peace? Not completely, I said, but I'm beginning to savor the idea. We left his office just as it started to drizzle. On the street, I saw a young woman with an umbrella covering her grandmother as they crossed. I don't know why, but I watched them for a while. I thought, I wish Lyra had done that just once. Covered me, cared for me, seen me. But no, she only knew how to take. Back at Beatrix's house, I told her everything. She nodded while serving soup. It's what's fair, Serafina. You didn't do it for revenge. You did it for yourself. And she was right, because every line of that new will was an act of affirmation, a declaration that I am no one's property, that my story doesn't end with a slap or a viral video. It ends as I decide. The rain gently tapped against the windows as I ate my soup. I felt strong, like a woman who has finally taken the helm of her own ship. Lyra doesn't know it yet, but she will soon find out. It was Alistair who told me. Your daughter came to the office today, he said in a dry tone, like someone describing a storm that has already passed. She arrived without an appointment, demanded explanations, shouted. I imagined it all. Lyra standing there in her executive suit, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks, furious at not understanding how the world, her world, could be spinning without her permission. What do you mean she excluded me? I'm her only daughter, she yelled, according to Alistair. There must be a mistake. Who manipulated her? Was it Beatrix, huh? Of course. Always a conspiracy, never a mirror. When Alistair explained that there was no mistake, that it was a valid, signed, sealed, and ironclad document, Lyra lost her temper. This is a betrayal. No, Alistair replied firmly. This is justice. That same day, I received her first text message. Then came the calls. At first, furious. What kind of mother does this? Then, pitiful, Mom, please, let's talk, we can fix this. And then, desperate, tell me what you want, tell me how I can reverse it. I didn't answer. Not because I enjoyed seeing her beg, but because I had nothing left to say. I said it all when I signed that will. I screamed it all when I left that house without looking back. One night, around 10, Lyra showed up at Beatrix's house. She knocked on the door forcefully. Beatrix didn't want to open it. She's manipulating you, Serafina, she told me. But I, with my heart pounding like a drum, decided to face her. I opened the door. There was my daughter, with red eyes, smeared makeup, her designer bag hanging crookedly from her arm. Mom, she barely said. I didn't invite her in. Why are you doing this to me? I didn't do it to you, I replied. I did it for me. She clung to the door frame, as if by doing so she could also cling to what she had lost. I just need one chance. One. To show you that I love you. I looked at her in silence. The face I had kissed so many times, the hands that had held mine so tightly as a child. And it hurt, of course it hurt, but pain is not a sufficient reason to continue allowing abuse. Your chance was when you slapped me, I told her, in front of 30 people. When you shared that video, when you laughed while others pointed fingers at me. That was your chance, and you lost it. She fell silent. I'm sorry, Lyra, I whispered. But it was no longer enough. I closed the door. No slam, no anger, just a dry click, like closing a chapter. Beatrix hugged me without a word. I sat down, trembling, with the blanket over my legs and my eyes full not of tears, but of memory. Of all that was and all that will no longer be. Lyra now knows the cost of betrayal. Not in shouts, not in punishments. In silence and in firmness. A few days later, Lyra requested one last meeting. For closure, she said in a curt message. No pleas, no demands. Just that word, closure. And for some reason, I decided to accept. I met her at a discreet cafe, far from the city center, where no one would know us. She arrived on time. She has always been punctual, even for her contempt. She was dressed soberly, without makeup. Her eyes were swollen, and yet, she tried to smile. Thanks for coming, Mom. I didn't reply, just nodded and wrapped my hands around the hot mug. Chamomile, as always. She ordered a black coffee. The silence between us was thick, as if it filled every corner, until Lyra spoke. I didn't come to beg. I just wanted to understand why. Why did you go so far? You could have talked to me. I looked into her eyes, that gaze that once softened me, now it just seemed distant, like looking at a photograph of someone no longer alive. You want to understand why? I asked. She nodded. I'll tell you. It wasn't the slap that hurt Lyra. It was the silence that followed, the laughter, the fact that no one stood up. But most of all, it hurt that you saw nothing wrong with what you did. Mom, it was my birthday, I was stressed. No, it wasn't stress. It was contempt. And you know it. She stood still, like a pillar of salt. For years, everything I did for you became an obligation, never reciprocated love. Every gesture of mine was an investment you thought you could cash in without giving anything back. I was your mother, your shadow, your assistant, your wallet, but never your equal. Lyra looked down. Her voice came out broken. I didn't want it to come to this. But we did. And you pushed me here. And do you know why I did it, Lyra? Because I understood that respect is not negotiable, not even with your own children. I saw her tremble slightly. For a second, the little girl I raised seemed to peek out from behind that facade of a successful woman. And you don't love me anymore? She asked. That was cruel. I can't love myself through you anymore. Silence followed. What now? Everything starts with truth. You hurt me, and I won't allow it. I stood, leaving money. One last look. You hit my soul, not my face. I left. No stopping, no, I love you, because some wounds heal at a distance. Sometimes love means walking away. I never saw her again. I didn't care about her life. Something felt unfinished for me. I wrote a letter. Purple ink, golden-edged paper, even goodbyes deserve beauty. I slipped it into the mailbox of what was once my home and left. Lyra, I'm not writing to punish or ask you back. I don't want silence to be our last word. I don't wish you ill. I hope you'll know selfless love, a hug without obligation, help without guilt, someone seeing you for you. I was that someone. You didn't value it, but I don't regret loving you. It broke me, but rebuilt me too. I'm not a victim. I'm a woman who chose herself. You lost my presence, more valuable than any inheritance. No grudges, but no place for you. I'll build peace for myself, the foundation's young women, those who are grateful, those who believe in love as a bridge. This is my farewell. No more words, no more tears. Just goodbye. Your mother, Serafina.